And here's this car that comes up right, almost smacks my rear end. And it's a couple kids. I see a couple kids in the car having a good time. They pass me going across the double yellow line, the double orange line, going 100 miles an hour almost. And they're enjoying it. We know how many deaths we've had on Highway 41. And they almost went head on into another car who had to swerve over to the curb to not be hit. Well, Angelo, everything that I always want to be. I want to be that beautiful, release of all that and all those things that we're talking about, and being all that I can be in that moment. Hell no, I was not.
Yes, you were.
And I'm talking about human nature. No, I reverted from oneness blessing, from ministerial leader to Marine combat leader. I looked at them and I was furious. And I used some really choice words, which I can't use here, I know that. Stella would be angry with me, she won't feel me. But anyway, I used those choice words. And what did Angelo do in that moment? No, I wasn't connected to spirit at all. I was enjoying the third dimension, human dimension. And it was okay. It's okay to be that. But what I really did was I threw out a universal principle that applies to each one of us. Now, this is a unique situation, but it applies to each one of us. And what is that universal principle? He who angers you, Angelo, conquers you. I put a set of chains on myself. He owned me at that point. When somebody angers us, and we respond at that same level of negative consciousness, we are under that person's control. And we are now disassociated emotionally with the source of all there is. Interesting, isn't it? Basically, spiritual beings that we are and creative. When we first started the PLC, interesting things were going on. I always use the word spirituality. How many of you have been in religions and churches where the word spirituality was foo-foo? And you don't use the word spirituality. It's kind of interesting. We need to come to the realization, and we need to determine our magnificence so that we can be in that consciousness of spiritual freedom. We need to know, what does it mean to be all that we can be? So what we do is we need to go back and say, okay, I need to be willing to enhance my life experiences by figuring it all out. How can I show the magnificence of my being in all that I do? Well, the first thing is to realize that we are creative beings, and we can prove it. I can prove it right here, right now, that we are here to create our life experiences. This little gadget here, this little gadget worked miracles in my life not too long ago. I wanted to talk to London. Our manager there of Emerson International could not make the conference. We were going to have a get-together and plan the unfoldment of Emerson International. So I called him on this iPhone. And not only that, I Skyped him. And he and I had about a 1-hour conversation in my office. He's in his London office, and I'm here in Oakhurst, and we started planning the involvement of Emerson Institution. Isn't that cool? Now, where did this come from? And it proves a point here.
Yeah.
There is an there's a universal law that says, if I can dream it, I can conceive it, I can have it manifest in my life. So if I can dream it, I can achieve it. Someone had to dream this. Someone had to put it in mind and focus on it. And somebody had to be the creative being of the word, the magnificent of that being, to bring this forward. I don't care what we look at. This little gadget is pretty special, but it just didn't show up from the universe. Somebody had to take care of it and do it. All of our so-called discoveries, every one of them, proves that we are creative beings. Whether it's a computer that talks to the blind. I had a guy who called me Michael. He says, Angelo, I'm totally blind, but I want to start taking classes. And I says, okay, do you know Braille? Because I learned Braille when I was a teacher. He says, no, I don't need Braille. I said, well, he says, just email me stuff. He says, I have a computer that talks to me. Isn't that cool? Did you know that? We have computers that will literally talk to the blind. That's pretty special. Where did that come from? Who conceived of that? Where did that come from? We're connected to the source of all there is. That's who we are. We don't have to go around beating our heads against the bushes and trying to convince people that we're creative, eternal spiritual beings. We are. All they have to do is wake up and look around. That's all they have to do. And so all of these things that I'm talking about, if you go back several years, they would have been called science fiction. But I remember Dick Tracy. I remember his watch that he talked to and he could see in. That was before he even was conceived by anybody. But it existed. Just the idea of aerodynamics existed. It's a universal principle. It existed during the time of Jesus. We could have had jets in the airplane. But the consciousness, our consciousness had not grown and not evolved enough to be able to use these universal principles that already exist. So this idea of spiritual freedom, to me, it's pretty darn awesome. And the main thing here during this month is that we need to correct our own false belief systems. We have false beliefs, or we don't understand who and what we are. We don't know how magnificent we are. Emmett Fox, I love Emmett Fox. He's a spiritual teacher who wrote a lot of things. But he had a fable that he uses. I was thinking it was pretty cool. This fable was about a guy who was in prison. And yeah, fable was a story that teaches a lesson. And he was in prison, and he was in prison for many years, and the only person he ever talked to, ever saw, was this jailer who brought him bread and water every day. That's all. So one day he was so distressed, he was so upset that he wanted to commit suicide, but he had no means to do that. So he thought, I'll just attack the jailer, and maybe he'll shoot me and put me out of my misery. And so what does he do? He's looking over his cell one night, and he goes to the cell door, and he opens it. It was not locked. It had never been locked for years. He'd been in the cell. And you see the lesson that we're talking about here? So he walks out of the cell, and he's a free man. And what does that tell us about us? Emmett Fox said, you know, I'm using this fable to tell us that we all put ourselves in these cells, in these prisons. Whether it's a consciousness of lack, of need, of not being worthy enough, or following the control of our minds that say you're not good enough. And your mother loves your brother than she loves you. Well, that's it. Yeah, I got over that. But anyway, so what this is all about is that being all that we can be means that we need to identify our magnificence. And we need to know that no matter what the circumstance is, no matter what we're facing, it doesn't matter. It just is. And Viktor Frankl is my hero, and I use him as a way shower a lot of times when I do my talks. But you know, he was a psychiatrist who was put into a Nazi death camp. And he's there, and one day he's in a cell, and like this guy in the fable, but he discovers something. He says, you know, they can hurt my body, they can control my environment, but there's one thing they can't touch. And he called it the last human freedom. And what is that? Well, he said, I can be an observer of what's going on. I can just relax and not attach myself to this drama that's going on, that's so devastating, where people are killed and dying. I can just be the observer and not be attached to it and release it, he said. And this is how he transcended the insidious control of the conscious mind. The conditioned mind that says, hey, you're in prison, you're going to be here forever, they're going to kill you. Many of his friends didn't make it because they sucked into and they got absorbed by what was going on and didn't follow basically this idea of spiritual freedom, where you can be all that you can be all the time, regardless of the perception of the devastation that's beyond you, just by remembering and knowing that you're a magnificent, eternal. He knew he was an eternal being. There is nothing that they could take away from him when it came to his eternality. He was free. He was free in the most devastating condition that you could possibly be in. And he walked out of there and was able to tell his story. So when things happen and we perceive things happening, I'll wind this down, we tend to, you know, get anxious, and we start allowing the conditioned mind to work us over a little bit. And there's a story It relates to how we act sometimes. This mother of 6 children went shopping, and one of the older child watched the kids. When she came home from the grocery store, she noticed that her 6 kids were in a circle in the living room, and their attention was on something. She said, my God, I've never been able to get their attention like that, all of them. My gosh, what's going on? So she goes up to the circle, and in horror, she sees something that she went off the deep end. 6 baby skunks in the middle of that circle. And the kids are playing with them. What does she do? She screams. She yells. She says, out of here, let's run, let's go, we're going to escape this. And so each kid picked up a baby skunk and ran out the door. That is really something. True story, by the way. And runs out the door, and of course, nature being what it is, they released their perfume and took care of everything. And it relates to some of our experiences. You know, we have so many baby skunks showing up in our lives. You know, we can grab them and scream and run out the door. But we can just say this, hey, wait a minute, these are just baby skunks. Now, what would have Angelo done if he was in that same position? I thought about that. I said, oh my God, would I do this? When I said, oh, what beautiful cuddly baby skunks. Sure, right. So when things like that, we have our baby skunks, whether it's relationship issues or the economy, I don't care what it is. All those things mean nothing. Cannot touch that freedom that we have, that freedom to witness and to observe and not be attached to. Because 237 years ago, we celebrated an announcement, a declaration, that we are spiritual, creative beings, incarnated, I use the word incarnated spiritual beings that experience life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is our heritage. And say it with me, Doctor. And so it is. We're done.